Welcome back. Ukraine, Russia, and the entire international community are grappling with President Trump's surprise 180 on his view of the war in Ukraine. Yesterday, after meeting with President Zelensky, the president posted on social media, quote, "I think Ukraine, with the support of the European Union, is in a position to fight and win all of Ukraine back in its original form. With time, patience, and the financial support of Europe and in particular NATO, the original borders from where this war started is very much an option." President Zelensky called the post a big shift and very positive, and touted President Trump as a game changer in the ongoing war. Moscow, meanwhile, is rejecting his suggestion that Ukraine could win the war, calling it a misguided proposition, with some in the Kremlin also questioning whether the president's position will be a lasting one. Joining me now on set is the president of Finland, Alexander Stubb. Finland, we should remind you, joined NATO just 2 years ago and borders Russia. Mr. President, thank you so much for being here.
Thanks.
It's a real honor to have you. We appreciate it. We know you're very busy, so thank you for stopping by. I have to start off by getting your reaction to President Trump's post. When you hear him say Ukraine can, in fact, reclaim all of its territory, what's your reaction to that?
Yeah, I think it was a very strong posting. And as I've told many of my friends, you should never underestimate the capacity of President Trump to negotiate peace. And I do think this was potentially a game changer. I had the chance to talk to President Zelensky about it and also exchange a couple of words with President Trump about it last night at the reception. I think Putin should realize that President Trump is very serious and he's running out of patience.
Can you give us some insight? What specifically did the president say to you that makes you know he is serious? And Russia says, well, he could change his mind. But you say that's not what's going to happen.
Well, it's a very strong statement. Remember that really this war is about three things. It's about the independence of Ukraine, the sovereignty of Ukraine, and the territorial integrity of Ukraine. Mm-hmm. So if, as a negotiating position, the President of the United States says that, as a matter of fact, Russia has no right to claim that territory, then I think the negotiations will begin in earnest. And I've been stressing from the beginning that we need to do this in two phases. First phase is a ceasefire, so that's when the killing stops. And after that, you start negotiating. So I do think that we're moving in the right direction. Strong
words. Does it need to be backed up by action? And of course, the United States is calling on European nations to stop buying oil from Russia. Is that part of what needs to happen first?
Oh, definitely. I mean, strong words backed by action. And I think, in my mind, the action is on three pillars. The first one is security guarantees, which we have been negotiating together with the United States ever since we met in the White House a few weeks back. And they're pretty much finalized. Secondly, it's about Europe stopping to buy Russian oil and gas. And there, I think the finger pointing is very easy. It's Hungary and Slovakia.
What about France?
Well, France on liquefied gas. But basically, we brought down, I think, gas by 80% and oil by 90%. Now the European Commission is working on a total ban. And I think President Trump is absolutely right on that point. And the third issue is secondary sanctions. But I stress all the time that President Trump is the only one who can end this war, but we need to do this as a team together, Europe and the United States.
So Europe needs to take those actions, and then does the United States, from your perspective, need to impose stiff sanctions?
Well, the U.S., of course, decides for itself, but I do think that this is very much a team effort. So we're trying to find the right ways. What do we do with the frozen assets? How do we stop buying oil and gas? What kind of secondary sanctions do we do? Why do we do this? Because we do not want to finance the Russian war machinery. The Russian economy is actually doing very poorly, and I think that's one of the reasons that President Trump reacted.
Mr. President, I have to get your reaction to something else that President Trump said yesterday that made a lot of news. He said he believes NATO should shoot down Russian aircrafts if it enters its airspace. Do you agree with him?
Well, we have a very strict protocol on how we work in these types of situations. Obviously, we've had many violations of airspace over the years, and the protocol that we follow is very rigid. I think you have to look at it case by case. I think the basic message right now is that Russia is testing us. It's testing us with drones. It's testing us with airspace violations. It's testing us with sabotaging underwater cables. And my message always as a Finn is to first, be calm, cool, and collected, look at the situation, and then take the decisions.
So you don't think automatically these drones should be shot down?
Automatically, we have a procedure on how we deal with these types of issues, and it's our defense forces and our military that does it. And of course, if someone violates our airspace, they have the right to react.
You know, I had the opportunity to interview President Zelensky several months ago. He said his big concern is that Russia is, in fact, planning to go into other European nations. Do you share that concern? And could sending these drones into NATO airspace be an indication that that's what he's eyeing?
Well, I think it's good to start from the basics. I think what Putin and Russia have done in Ukraine is one of the biggest strategic and military failures in recent history. He was supposed to walk into Kyiv in 4 days. Now we're almost 4 years into the war. In the last 1,000 days, he has advanced 1% of Ukrainian territory. So what we need to understand in Europe is that Russia doesn't have the capacity to do these kinds of moves, but they do have the capacity to test us, and that's what we have to prepare for.
Based on what you are saying, do you think it's realistic for Ukraine to be able to reclaim all of the territory that Russia illegally took?
I think it's realistic that we work towards that aim, and that decision can be taken only by Ukraine itself. I think the key is that they retain their independence and their sovereignty to decide EU membership, NATO membership, security guarantees, and military, and then make sure that we never accept any land acquisition coming from Russia towards Ukraine. Certainly Finland will never accept that.
I want to play just a little bit more of what President Trump had to say at his speech at the UN yesterday. Take a look.
Inexcusably, even NATO countries have not cut off much Russian energy and Russian energy products, which, as you know, I found out about 2 weeks ago, and I wasn't happy. Think of it. They're funding the war against themselves. Who the hell ever heard of that one?
What did you make of that part of his speech? And obviously, you're saying it is time to take a hard look.
I think it was spot on, and it's good for the President of the United States to tell that to his NATO allies in the UN. Of course, it's easy for me to say because we've cut off Russian oil and gas a long time ago, so we don't have a problem with it. But it's good to do some finger pointing and increase the pressure, and I think he's absolutely right.
What is your message to Vladimir Putin as we sit here today?
Please come to the negotiating table. I think it's very important to understand that this war will end up, of course, in a negotiating table. And what we need to have first is a date and a place for the first meeting between Volodymyr Zelensky and President Putin. And then we start, after a ceasefire, peace negotiations in earnest, because too many people are dying.
All right. President Stubb of Finland, thank you so much for being here. We really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
We thank you for watching, and remember, stay updated on breaking news and top stories on the NBC News app or watch live on our YouTube channel.